so we will call the Senate Judiciary Committee to order. I want to make just a few comments that hopefully will be helpful to conferees and to our committee running smoothly. There is a 24-hour deadline that if you would like to be a conferee and have your written testimony presented in committee documents to the committee members, that needs to be in by 24 hours before our committee meeting. Our committee meets pretty regularly, 10:30. We had one hearing that was moved back to 11, but our regularly scheduled time is 10:30 a.m. So if you could be sure to get that into the committee assistant 24 hours ahead of time, that gives her time to organize the documents and get them in place so that it's ready for the committee members when we meet. Her email address is iris.evans@senate.ks.gov. So please make sure to get your testimony in on time. And another piece of just housekeeping, if you will, I've got some notes for the committee members about making amendments since we're trying to be paperless, but a couple different options for you to contact the committee assistant to get your amendments printed out. It's often easier to have a paper copy when we're working on particularly complicated amendments to statutes, so I'll pass that around, and that'll they're already in your at your desk or in your committee folder about making amendments as we work bills. Also, another piece of housekeeping, if you will, at your desk for each committee member is the Kansas Sentencing Guidelines Desk Reference Manual 2020, and in there you'll see a lot of useful information provided to us by the Kansas Sentencing Commission, along with a grid, kind of a flow chart for Senate Bill 123 eligibility, and a 2021 legislative bill impact prison bed space assessments as of January 29th, 2021. So those are at each committee member's desk for you. And with that, I will then make a request for any bill introductions. Okay, I don't see any, but we'll then move on. And one last piece of information, we don't have any prison bed assessment for SB 56 because it deals only with requiring certain businesses to post human trafficking notices and does not touch on sentencing, but we'll get to Senate Bill 56 here shortly. And in fact, then we will then proceed to open the hearing on Senate Bill 56. And if we could then start with the reviser giving us a short bill brief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee. This is Jason Thompson with the Revisor's Office. Senate Bill 56 requires posting of a human trafficking awareness notice approved by the Attorney General in certain businesses and public places. The statute amended is KSA 75-759, which currently requires posting of a notice offering help to victims of human trafficking to be accessible on the official website of the Attorney General, the Department for Children and Families, and the Department of Labor. The bill would maintain this requirement. Current law also provides that the notice may be posted in a prominent and accessible location in workplaces. The bill would change this to require posting of the notice in places required to post notices under the Kansas Act Against Discrimination, the Kansas Age Discrimination in Employment Act, the Kansas Child Labor Law, the Employment Security Law, or the Workers' Compensation Act. The bill also requires the notice to be posted in a location visible to members of the public in sexually oriented businesses, massage parlors, healthcare facilities, convenience stores, and truck stops, and also rest areas and visitor centers under the state supervision or control. Finally, the bill would require the Attorney General to adopt some rules and regulations regarding content, size, etc. of the notice as deemed appropriate to help and support victims of human trafficking, including the current information about the National Human Trafficking Hotline that's required by law. But you'll notice the current language of the notice that's required in the statute is stricken in favor of this rules and regs approach under the bill. And I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Jason. Committee members, any questions for the reviser? Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason, is this exactly the bill that we had last year on this same subject, or have there been any substantial changes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason Thompson again. Yes, so Senator Thompson's correct. We did hear this bill last year. It passed committee. It was Senate Bill 371. It did pass out of committee, and it did pass the Senate 39-0. If I recall, the only real change was to switch to the rules and regs approach. But even that, I think, was discussed in last year's bill. So it's not really very different at all.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from committee members? I have one question. The bill then, as written, would require posting in a prominent and accessible location. Is that, tell me, is that, for instance, in an employee's lounge, or is that outward public facing?
Madam Chair, if I understood correctly, you're asking about under the bill, not under the current law?
That's correct. Under the bill, where would the notice be posted, and is it dependent on whether, what type of business it is?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. This is Jason Thompson again. So there are two different posting requirements. So, well, there's actually three in the bill. So subsection A1 is the website requirement, which is current law maintained. Subsection A2 is the notice that has to be placed in a prominent and accessible location where you post notices in your workplace for your employees, right? So anywhere you'd have your child labor law posting or your employment discrimination posting, it would go there as well. That's for the employee side. And then subsection A3 is a notice posted in a location visible to members of the public. And that applies to the sexually oriented businesses, the massage parlors, et cetera. So there's actually kind of three different postings. And if I misspoke, obviously the conferees can correct me, but that's my understanding of A1, 2, and 3.
Thank you. And then we would change it to under rules and regs for the content size and other characteristics of the notice. That's the one difference then you would say from last session when this passed through the Senate?
Yes, Madam Chair. So Jason Thompson again. The bill last year did not change the statutory requirements of what's in the notice. So the change this year is to strike those statutory pieces of language and instead put that in rules and regs for the Attorney General. And I was just looking at the bill to confirm that, but yeah, last year that was the approach, was to leave it in statute. And the approach in this bill is to defer that to rules and regulations.
Thank you, Jason. Any other questions for the reviser on Senate Bill 56 from the committee? Seeing none, then we will welcome our first proponent conferee. That is Jennifer Montgomery from the Kansas Attorney General's Office. Welcome, Ms. Montgomery. Please introduce yourself, and again, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. My name is Jennifer Montgomery. I am here this morning representing the Kansas Human Trafficking Advisory Board, of which I am the current chair. Each year, the Kansas Human Trafficking Advisory Board makes legislative recommendations based on best practices and research-based approaches to combating human trafficking. This particular bill, as the reviser mentioned, is the same bill, primarily as the bill that was introduced last year and passed by the Senate 39-0. Unfortunately, it was not considered by the House prior to the legislature's early adjournment due to COVID. So this is Groundhog Day, but you are hearing the exact same bill once again. I wanted to note a couple of things. You have my written testimony. I did want to mention that human trafficking has been reported in all 50 states. In Kansas, we see both labor and sex trafficking occurring in rural, urban, and suburban areas of the state. The National Human Trafficking Hotline keeps data each year on how many contacts they receive from each state. So in 2019, which was the most recent full year data available, they reported 225 contacts originating from our state. And these contacts were regarding both sex and labor trafficking. When these tips are called in or to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, we have a process in place here in Kansas. Those tips are then routed typically through the KBI. We have a staff person who receives these tips as well as some other law enforcement agencies in the state and assigns them and follows up on them for appropriate action. It's important to understand that posting this hotline number is important because it not only provides tips to law enforcement, as I mentioned, it also connects victims and survivors of sex and labor trafficking with services and support. This is really important. Our office has provided posters with this information and brochures free of charge for anyone who requests them. We also have these materials available free of charge to download on our website. The HTAB recommends that posting of the hotline be required in certain businesses, as the revisor mentioned, and public places, much like many other states across the country. You have my written testimony. With that, I would be happy to stand for any questions.
Montgomery, and we will reserve questions for after the proponents have all testified. Then we'll ask Sharon Sullivan from the Topeka Shawnee County Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you so much. I am Dr. Sharon Sullivan. Thank you for allowing me to testify in support of Senate Bill 56, the mandatory posting of the National Human Trafficking Hotline. I'm here as representative of the Topeka Shawnee County Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. So posting the National Human Trafficking Hotline is a very easy way to help those who are being victimized and ultimately reduce human trafficking in our state. The cost of the posters is already borne by the Attorney General's office, so that all that is needed is legislation and commitment. Prominent and uniform posting of the Human Trafficking Hotline will do at least 6 things. 1, consistent access to the Human Trafficking Hotline will make it easier for victimized people to get help. The information will be available in the majority of places they go, so they have multiple opportunities to utilize the information. 2, it will raise awareness that human trafficking is real and it's happening here in Kansas. I've been providing human trafficking education in Kansas for 15 years, yet I am continually asked, but that doesn't happen here, right? 3, awareness often results in increased identification of human trafficked people. When citizens call the hotline, they are helping someone who may not be able to ask for help for themselves. Good Samaritans make a difference. When our communities realize that human trafficking is here, they understand the critical importance of investing in prevention strategies, which reduces vulnerabilities to exploitation and abuse. 5, the Human Trafficking Hotline makes visible to the victimized people among us. It encourages our communities to increase resources and support to victim service agencies. And finally, prominent and uniform posting of the Human Trafficking Hotline serves notice to perpetrators and exploiters that victimization is not a Kansas value. We take this crime seriously, and you are not welcome here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Are there any other proponent conferees who would like to provide oral testimony? Seeing and hearing none, then I would point out to the committee we have proponent written testimony from Thomas Pallas of Fuel Time, Tara Mays, Kansas Hospital Association, and Ed Klump, Kansas Sheriff's Association, Kansas Association Chiefs of Police, and Kansas Peace Officers Association. Do we have any questions from committee members for the conferees? I have a quick question for either of the conferees. It sounds like the last year that we have information regarding how many contacts to the hotline was from 2019. Do we know when we can receive an update on that figure? And that would be for either Ms. Montgomery or Ms. Sullivan.
Madam Chair, I would be happy to address that question.
Sure, go ahead and identify yourself first. Thank you.
Yes, Jennifer Montgomery, Chair of the Human Trafficking Advisory Board. That information is typically collected over a period of time by the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Polaris is the national organization that administers the hotline. They usually do it in 6-month increments. And I noticed this year that they are a little bit behind, and I think that that is probably due to COVID, but that information should be available, I would think, later in this calendar year.
Do we have any insight into whether whether there's been an increase in incidents due to the pandemic and troubling times for folks, or do we have any idea? Go ahead, Ms. Montgomery.
Yes, this is Jennifer Montgomery. We have heard anecdotally through our statewide partners. The Attorney General's office provides grants to a number of victim service agencies across the entire state of Kansas. And certainly they've reported to us over the last 9 to however long it's been, almost 12 months, during the pandemic, that they have received a lot of requests for services. Certainly the way services are being able to be delivered to victims of exploitation has changed some because of the pandemic. These agencies have made adjustments, however, and are certainly providing these services.
Would you expect then when you get the next update that it would be an uptick, unfortunately, in the number of contacts from Kansas to the hotlines?
This is Jennifer Montgomery. I certainly think that that is possible. However, there is oftentimes a difference in the number of contacts to the National Human Trafficking Hotline and the number that our victim service providers report of individuals who are self-identified victims of exploitation that come and request services. So that remains to be seen how those numbers play out. So we'll wait and see what that looks like once we have more data.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from committee members? Seeing none. Oh, excuse me, Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it appears to me that this is basically saying you need to post this information if you are one of these locations. Is that right? But yet it's stricken all the language, but just leaves the traffic hotline, the National Traffic Hotline. Am I missing something? I'm not seeing exactly what's supposed to be posted.
Senator, I think part of the discussion was that the bill allows that the Attorney General shall adopt rules and regulations prescribing the exact contents, size, and other characteristics of the notices, which in the bill you have in front of you are stricken but would be then adopted probably on a more by the Attorney General through rules and regulations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I read that too quickly and I missed the word content. I saw size, et cetera. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Good question. Any other questions from committee members? All right, seeing none, I would point out to the committee that we don't have any opponent testimony in front of you, but are there any opponent conferees either in the committee meeting room or online? And seeing and hearing none, there is no neutral testimony either written or oral, but I will ask, are there any neutral conferees in the meeting room or online? And seeing and hearing none, then we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 56. In committee, then we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 59. And I would ask Jason then, and I would also thank our conferees first, Ms. Montgomery and Ms. Sullivan, for your testimony on Senate Bill 56. Moving back then to Senate Bill 59, if we could have a bill brief from Jason, the reviser.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Jason Thompson with the Revisor's Office. Senate Bill 59 modifies the crimes of selling sexual relations, promoting the sale of sexual relations, and buying sexual relations by changing terminology from sexual relations to a sex act. And you'll see that the main sections of the bill are Section 3, which I've identified on page 6, amending KSA 21-6419. That's the crime of selling sexual relations. It becomes the crime of selling a sex act. Then Section 4, beginning on page 7, that's KSA 21-6420. That's the crime of promoting the sale of sexual relations. It becomes promoting the sale of a sex act. And finally, Section 5, beginning on page 8, is 21-6421, the crime of buying sexual relations. That becomes buying a sex act. The amendments in the rest of the bill in sections 1, 2, and 6 through 18 that make it so long are all just to reflect this change in terminology from sexual relations to a sex act wherever those references appear in our other statutes, and are otherwise making technical corrections. So there's no other substantive change in the bill. It's all about the terminology change. And I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Jason. Could you give us any legislative history on this bill? Had this been heard last session? And if so, what was the outcome?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Jason Thompson again. And I should get used to this on the ones you're rehearing, and I forget most of the time, but I do have it. Senate Bill 373 last year was heard by this committee. It did pass with a tiny technical amendment that is still contained in this bill. And then it passed the Senate floor 40-0. It did receive a hearing in the House committee, and it passed out of the House committee as well. They added a different bill to it, which is not included in this bill, but it did pass out of the House Committee on Judiciary last year as well, but did not receive any action on the House floor.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Senator Haley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Thompson. I remember this from years past and pleased to see it come back again. It is primarily semantics, and the semantics have deeper consequences, of course, going from the word relations, which is a broader term, a specific term, to merely a sex act, which is certainly more encompassing, especially for these crimes. You know, I supported this before, and I'm wondering, did I just miss something last year, Mr. Thompson, specifically reading it again last night? We start getting into, on page 5, the definitions of criminal street gang membership. This is something that I missed last year. I know that historically I've been concerned about this language, how we define that, and was that, first of all, was this in last year's bill, this term in 373, criminal street gang membership language? First of all, and second of all, is it really necessary for the semantics that we're attempting to address?
Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason Thompson again. This is one of the sections. I gave it as an example of just some technical cleanup, and I'll explain this one because it doesn't look as technical, but trust me, it is. Section 2 that this is part of is KSA 21-6328, which is our definitions for the RICO Act, the Kansas Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act. And the provision that you see on page 5 begins a couple pages before, where it's just defining all of the crimes that you could commit that would be part of a racketeering charge. So what's added here is basically just the name of the crime. We left out a couple names. You'll see that all of them have names related to them, and these are the names of those crimes that were just inadvertently left out. So our editors picked up they should be added here much like down at the bottom of page 5, we're changing the name from selling sexual relations to selling a sex act. We're correcting the name on KSA 216314 to recruiting criminal street gang membership so that it's accurate. So it's not a substantive change. It's just referencing the crime that already exists in the law. And it's a technical change we're making while we're in the statute just to make it correct.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, Mr. Thompson, because I, for one, hang on your every word as the gospel when it comes to our statute. This is merely a recodification by going to the criminal street gang membership. This is merely codification of what is current law, or does this redefine? So this is current law, but realigning it with the statute. Would that be an accurate description?
Madam Chair, this is Jason Thompson again. It is accurate to say that this does not change current law on criminal street gang membership, and it does not change current law on racketeering, RICO, which is the section we're in here. If we didn't make this change, it would make no difference. The statute is already cited. Committing this conduct also counts toward racketeering, but by putting the name of the crime in here, it accurately reflects the name of the crime and makes it accurate with the rest of the statute. So it doesn't affect any current law on either racketeering or on criminal street gang membership. Hopefully that helps.
It does. Thank you again, Mr. Thompson, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee then, any other questions for the reviser? Seeing none, then we will have our proponent conferee, Ms. Jennifer Montgomery from Kansas Attorney General's Office, and welcome again to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Again, I'm here representing recommendations from the Kansas Human Trafficking Advisory Board. As the reviser mentioned, this is a bill that was also considered during the previous session. While it may sound like a simple change in terminology, I can tell you that this is anything but small to those who have been victimized by sexual exploitation. In 2013, groups advocating for survivors of human trafficking asked for the removal of the terms prostitute and prostitution from our Kansas statutes. They're attached to those words. We made those changes in 2013. Since that time, our anti-trafficking laws have used the term sexual relations as in buying or selling sexual relations. Today, I would say to you all, we've evolved even further, really in our awareness and understanding of the dynamics involved in sex trafficking. This suggested change that was recommended by the HTAB to a sex act is a more neutral term and does not comply consent. And that is really the point of this. Sexual relations can have some implications that are uncomfortable for individuals who have been exploited sexually. So we are proposing to change that to a more neutral term, a sex act. And with that, I will stand for any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Montgomery. Committee, I'm going to ask, are there any more proponent conferees in the committee meeting room or online? Hearing and seeing none, I will direct committee members' attention. We have proponent conferee written testimony from Ed Klump, Kansas Sheriff's Association, Kansas Association Chiefs of Police, and Kansas Peace Officers Association. Committee, do we have any questions from the committee for our proponent conferee, Ms. Montgomery? Seeing none, and thank you, Ms. Montgomery, for your testimony today and appearing. And I will then direct committee's attention to, we have no neutral testimony in your folders, but do we have any neutral conferees either in the committee room or online? Seeing and hearing none, I'll let you know that we then have no opponent conferees, either written or oral in your committee folder, but do we have any conferees, opponents here in the committee meeting room or online? Hearing and seeing none, then we will, excuse me, Senator Haley, do you have a question?
I do, Madam Chair. Just special emphasis. I so rarely get a chance to do this in this committee, but I really would like to ask the committee at some point to see the proponent testimony that was written by Chief Ed Klump. I think it's succinct and it pretty much describes in 3 or 4 sentences why we should continue to support this measure. I don't know if I've ever done that in many years, but I think that it really codifies what we're doing here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Haley. And for the public, you can access committee testimony and, committee documents that are testimony from conferees by going to the Kansas Legislature website. I'm going to do it right now here on my computer, and you can look under committees, and if you, in the drop-down menu, you hit standing, and you can go then to Senate Judiciary, and if you'll look under miscellaneous and early release testimony files, you can then find the PDF of the written conferee testimony, proponent, opponent, and neutral on any bill that we have right there online for you to read. And we thank you, Senator Haley, for pointing that out. Committee, we're often running into situations where the hearing on our bills isn't taking the allotted committee time, so I'd like to make you aware that on the agenda, it's always possible to have action on bills previously heard, so make sure you're prepared to do that. Please look for a revised agenda probably to come out this afternoon, which will help direct committee to know for the remaining portion of this week what bills we might be working later this week. So, but always to be prepared that when we have time like we do today, that we might then take up those matters that we've previously heard. So with that, we're not going to do that today though, but with that, we will then be adjourned. Thank you.